Hello? See how the audio quality is. Hello. How we all doing? Just one sec. Apologies, I am just getting over a cold here, so there might be a bit of sniffing going on. What's up? How y'all doing? Gonna be, well, I guess we'll go ahead and 2 minutes past so we can go ahead and get the show on the road. What's up, everyone? Hopefully the camera is decently centered. Hey, it's gonna be, I guess, fairly laid back of a stream, but what I'm gonna be doing today is essentially just talking about the changes coming with Omega Game Framework version 1.2, as well as something I've got related to that in the future at the very end, that y'all may want to keep an eye on. So what do we got? Some of these are new people, it looks like. Outrack, Canel, and Nick. What's up, guys? Thanks for coming. Thanks for showing. All right, so yeah, right now Omega Game Framework is currently version 1.1, 1.1.1 technically if you're counting the patch, but so for Omega Game Framework version 1.2, I've been working hard on it. It's probably going to be the biggest update so far. It's got a lot of new features. I know a lot of you guys are still looking for tutorials and things to understand a lot of the features. I understand that. I really want to get to some of those, but it's taking time between improving Omega and contract work. So for today, we'll be going over the stuff coming in version 1.2. If you guys appreciate my work and the stuff oh, give me 1 second. Just noticed a bit of a bug. Yeah, it's streaming the wrong screen down here. 1 second. Let me fix that up. Automatic. And there we go. Make sure that fixed it for everything. Okay. So, to start with, if any of you are out there watching who appreciate my work on Omega, because Omega Game Framework was always intended to be free. It always will be free. But, and obviously I am still planning on doing more of the packs and stuff to be paid, but the framework itself and all the changes that come to that will be free and open source for all to use. If you appreciate that stuff, and, all right, that works better. Hey, Nick, if you appreciate basically the work I do and, you want to support it, it would be a great, if you have the money to spare, because I obviously know a lot of stuff's going on around the world with the just the economy in all sorts of countries. But if you have anything to spare and would like to support my work, I would greatly appreciate it. The best places to do that would be I have a Ko-fi if you want to do just a one-time donation, or if you want to do more of a subscription thing. I also have a Subscribestar that you can go to. The links to both of those should be in the description, and will probably be on the Studio Syndicate website soon. You might need to refresh the video in order to see them, but the links are also here on screen. I do not do, right now I don't do any tier rewards or anything like that, so just be aware, essentially the support would just be to help me continue work, so no reward tiers or anything like that, at least for right now. But if you would consider that, that'd be great. If not, again, Omega's totally going to be free permanently. Okay, so now let's pull up Omega Game Framework itself and get on talking. So to start off with, I want to reiterate kind of the purpose of why I created Omega Game Framework in the first place, because it's kind of important to what I want to talk about. So there's been, especially from Epic and places like that, there's been a big push in the last however many years to this whole idea of democratizing game development and sort of bringing AAA quality level games and high quality level games down to the level where indies can make stuff of that level. Now, most of the time when people talk about that, just from my perspective, a lot of that focus seems to go into into graphics and visuals and cosmetic aesthetic things, achieving that level of visual quality in an indie game. that like just one or two people or a handful of people work on. Excuse me. Now, that's all cool, but what I've always been more interested in is the type of games that are maybe not graphically the cream of the crop, but have a lot of complexity and a lot of depth and a lot of scale and content in their mechanics and in their design. So, I mean, just recently, actually, for example, I've been playing a lot of Xenoblade 3. And by that point, Monolith Soft is not a small studio at all. But that's an example of a game, not exactly the Last of Us 2 in terms of graphics, but it has a ton of content, has a ton of systems inner working. And I'm more interested in bringing something like that to that level of system and mechanical creation down to the level where it could be created with just a handful of people. Maybe even one person in some cases. So to that end, is kind of the reason I created Omega Game Framework, specifically so that a lot of the groundwork for creating those types of games and creating the systems that you would need to build games of that scale would already be done for you and be free and available for everyone, because that's the type of stuff I would like to make. It was like, well, I'll just make this plugin that does all the stuff I want to do and put it out for free, and anyone else can do it as well, or use it as well. With that in mind, I generally had two primary goals when it came to designing Omega. And the first one was to essentially take a lot of stuff that typically you need to do in C++ and make it blueprint only. For one, this makes people who aren't as familiar with C++ programming or traditional programming to get into game development and build games of that scale. But also, just for even someone like me who is very knowledgeable in programming in Unreal Engine C++, it's essentially, the idea would be it reduces the amount of work you have to do on the hard coding or the low level coding end, and allows you to create stuff a lot quicker through blueprints, and specifically do less blueprinting, less coding, because a lot of the heavy work is already done, which leads into the other reason I made this, was to essentially make sure a lot of that groundwork for a lot of base systems, whether it be things like attributes and skills and abilities, player abilities, or menus, or modular systems, singletons, all that stuff would be built already, including a lot of the specific features you might use in your game, like turn managers or grid managers or combatant group managers, things like that. Make sure that's all done and ready to go, so that when you start a new game, you can essentially create a prototype and a framework for your game in a day to a week, and it'll be all ready to go, and you can get to the part of making content and cosmetics, visuals, audios, creating the fun stuff sooner. And not that some people don't enjoy, the programming side. I do, but essentially reduce that work so that not only can you create games faster, but in the future, when you make more games, you don't need to be recreating the same systems over and over again, because they're already there, in this case, in Omega. So that's kind of the purpose overall of me designing Omega, and the mindset. So to that end, that's kind of pushed some of the changes, the additions that I've made recently with things like data items, which is actually where we're going to start off with. So let me pull up server, kind of go over the last update. So update 1.1, which is back in June, introduced a few things, but probably the big one was data items. Now, data items are effectively like data assets, but with a few specific features. One is they already have things they already have variables, properties for a name, a description, icon, and gameplay tags, and a gameplay category built right in, so you don't need to add those yourself, and they can be accessed anywhere. But in addition, they also include this thing called data traits, which is effectively like a data only or a data asset version of a component, of an actor component, essentially, where instead of having that level of weight that an actor component does, you're essentially, the idea basically being, if you had a type of item in your game, because essentially what data items are meant to do is meant to be any sort of data entity in your game. It could be a character, it could be an item, a weapon, a skill, an attribute, a faction, I don't know, a location, just anything that is meant to hold data in like one contained item or entity. And the idea is that you'll have a lot of different items or entities in your games that will vary depending on what they do. The common example I like to use is that in Persona 5, very popular game, so it's an easy example, you have a lot of different characters that you can interact with and form relationships with. And there's a few different systems that go along with that. So if you take 3 different characters, you might have, the example I use is you have Ryuji, Makoto, and Kawakami, but for those of you who haven't played Persona 5, I'll try to keep it a bit vague. Basically, you might have one trait that is for party members, as in people with this trait or entities with this trait can be placed into your party. You might have another one for the social link system, which is, or confidant system, which is, anyone with this confidant trait can have their confidant level up, which gives you new abilities and stuff. Or you might have a trait for characters that you can romance. So you might have specific scenes or lines of dialogue you put in that specific trait. And the idea is that you could take 3 different characters, and rather than doing a parent-child hierarchy, you could just create one item for all 3 of these characters and pick and choose which traits you want it. So one might have just the party member trait. Another might have the party member and the romance trait. Another might have party member and no romance, but it does have the confidant trait. So essentially it allows you to think more abstractly and get more creative with what traits you add onto what items, and containing everything you need for that character in one spot, rather than needing to create a bunch of different data assets and blueprints and that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's the general idea behind data items, and those are actually available right now in the engine, within Omega. You can already get those, use those, add traits, and use them in game. Now, I've been making some improvements to how those work, and I will show off a few of those right now, because that'll be one of the smaller changes to go over. I need to quickly refresh my memory, so let me pull up some stuff I posted on Twitter about this as well. If I go back, and here we go. So one of the big improvements being made to data items is that by default you can set up directories in your project settings that will automatically be scanned by the engine for any data items that are in there, so that you can load all of your data items in at the very start of the game and have access to them. So for example, or how would you do that? The idea is, what you would do is you would go to a content browser. Let's look up Omega Data Subsystem right here. And if we drag off from here, we can say get data items. And right here, this is every single data item in your project is going to be contained in this list. Provided that whatever directory they're in has been scanned by your project settings, which will be done if you go to Omega Data. Right here you can set up, like I have mine, this is my root folder, all my data items go in here. But this will be scanned at the start, and all of the data items that it finds get put into here. So it's essentially one way to quickly access all of them in game, quickly access a list of them, rather than having to manually go in and add them yourself. So say you added more in the future, or you added more through plugins or whatever, you wouldn't need to go and manually add them to every location you need. You would just be able to add them here and have access to them. You can have also more, rather, if you want to filter, basically also, sorry, let me start that again. In addition to that, if you're wanting to access specific types of data items, let's say I wanting to get all the items, but I don't want every other data item. You have a few ways you can filter out what type of data items you want to access. So for example, we have get data items. It actually shows right here. So we have things like get data items of category, get data items with tags, with traits and names. Some of these are simple, like the category tag. Every data item has a single tag that acts as its category, so that you put it into. So it might be, typically you might use something like, you might give it the item category, and then it would grab every data item, which actually, let's make a new data item to just show this a bit clearer. My data item. Yeah. And just to be clear, the items have owners. Depends on what you mean. So yeah, Canal is asking if the items have owners. It does kind of depend on what you mean by owner. From a programming perspective, there are data assets. So I don't remember who the owner of a data asset is, but it functions the same way as that, where it's probably like the game instance or the engine. In terms of, if you mean from a gameplay perspective of an owner, like someone who has the item, that's actually one thing I want to clarify. A data item is not an item in the sense that like an RPG item is. How do I put this? In that it's like it would just be limited to being a potion or a weapon or armor or something like that. A data item is more a term for an asset. It's a special type of data asset. And it could be anything. It could be equipment, items. It could also be skills. It could be a character. It could be an enemy. Anything like that. So right here, we already have some stuff like name, icon, description. You have gameplay category and gameplay tags here. Like say if I gave this the gameplay category of item, then when I grab it from here, it'll come out. We'll get it through here essentially. Same thing for tags. So if you wanted to get all the items in your game immediately and just filter out, say you wanted specifically all the swords or whatever, you could do that through here. You could also filter by traits. Now, traits, just to reiterate, are essentially lightweight components, and you can create new traits and through blueprints and add them in however you want. So, for example, we might give this attribute damage. If we use this item, we could apply, and these are traits I created. You would create most of the ones yourself, but we could damage his health by 100 when we use this item on him. Excuse me. We could also maybe use this as equipment, or actually that is a different trait. Let's see. Attribute modifier. Maybe this trait modifies an attribute. So you can totally customize what the traits are. You can also filter actors by the traits. Like, say you give all the actors with a trait of, I don't know, whatever you want. You want to get all the data items that have an attribute modifier trait. Then you can just do that right here and select the trait you want to filter by, and it will spit. It didn't want to get there. There we go. Spit all those out right here. So that's the main improvement to data items. There's a few more things I'm working on for that, but that'll be in the future. Give me 1 second. Gotta keep the throat hydrated. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of data items, some of the improvements that are coming to it. Now, next I want to talk about two new big features that will be coming to Omega, and these will, right now I'm thinking these will probably be two of the last like big changes or big new features that will be coming. And most after that will probably be just improvements to what's already existing. But those features to start with are, I guess I'll start with saying those two features are what I call the linear event system and then the flow graph system. So we'll start off with linear events. Now, if any of you have ever used RPG Maker or SRPG Studio, or I think Visual Novel Studio might be it, kind of those sort of things, you might be familiar with the way the system works. Essentially, the linear event system, or a linear event, or rather a linear event sequence, as they're called in here, is literally just an array, a list of customizable and reusable events that you can script that will play out in a linear sequence. And it's essentially a way of creating things like scenes, or creating, quests, or basically anything that you wouldn't want to play out. You'd want to play and in a linear sequence, and also not have to worry about stuff like kind of not having. Well, I guess it's better if I show you. It works very similarly to an event system in, say, RPG Maker. By the way, if any of you have watched the previous devlog for Circle of Orion, you might have already seen some of this stuff, but I'll show it off here. So essentially the way the linear event system works is you'd create a new variable. We'll just call this my event sequence. That was misspelled. Don't care. Let's look up linear event. And you'll have this right here, linear event sequence. And what this is I'm going to open up the dummy level, actually. No, actually, we'll use the level now so I don't get confused. Say showcase level. Anyway, what this is just, like I said, a series of customizable events you can play in a sequence. So right here, you'll open up the struct, and you can create however many events you want, and then you'll have a list of some demo events and some ones you can create yourself. But essentially, you'll just select the event you want, and it'll play out in order. And when it's done with one event, it'll move on to the next one. For example, I have one here for modifying the tags in your save game. You can decide what tags you want to modify, whether you want to add those tags or remove them, whether you're affecting the global save or the local save, or the active save, sorry. There's one for sending a simple message with a text message, etc. But you can also create your own. The way you would do that is as such. Say I wanted to create, I guess let's just say right now I want to create a simple event that'll print a string, and we're going to print 3 strings in this event. So let's go to blueprints. Let's look up linear event. Here we go. Not flow, no. Omega linear event. Let's create a new one called linear event simple print. And let's see. So let's write here. Our print text will go right here. We'll make it a string. We'll need to make sure to make it instance editable. Yes, that's actually part of the reason behind this as well, is that sorry. Let me back up a second. So I know I need to get into the habit of reading out the messages, because I realize these don't always show up on the VODs, so people don't know what I'm asking. So first of all, well, I'll answer your second question first. So Canal asks first, is my arm better? For those of you who don't know, I did take a bit of a break because I had a bit of carpal tunnel. My arm is getting better, so thank you very much for asking. It's not totally over it, so I'm still wearing the wrist, but I am able to work now. So it's not too bad. So thank you, I very much appreciate it. Yes, I am getting better, but carpal tunnel is sometimes can heal pretty slowly. So anyway, to his previous question, Canal asks, possible to have a delay on it, assuming he's talking about an event, as well to get to the next one. Yes, it is. That's kind of the idea behind them, is that they are not asynchronous. They're not asynchronous in the event, in the idea that you're meant to play a lot of them parallel to each other, but they are asynchronous in the event that it's not meant to be like functions where as it goes through a function instantly and passes on to the next one. They'll go to an event and it'll stay there until you manually tell it to continue. And I'll actually show you that here. So let's say we have our text here just as an example. Let's go and override on event begin. And let's say print string. That's pretty simple. We'll just plug that in. And actually, let us customize the color as well. All right. Now I want to, let's say after this, let's delay 1 second and then finish the event. So now, if I open up this blueprint again, let's clear that out and do 3 of these, which will all be, now this might be a little difficult. This sometimes does happen. I don't know if it's a bug with events or whatnot, but where it'll reclose the event sequence here. But all right, now I got the 3 events. Let's say the first one is hello. So the second one, this is my event. What's the third one? Bugs Bunny. Did I spell that right? Bugs Bunny, whatever. Didn't game end himself. If you know, you know. Anyway, so that's the event I'll use, and I can, like I showed there, I can customize these messages. And it'll play out those in an event. Now, the way I would play that out is, let's look for omega, is it sequence? Omega, well, there's two ways you can play it out, actually. One is you can use the subsystem, because there's a subsystem, and we'll say, let's see, omega linear event subsystem. If we can do play linear event right here, and we can just plug up the event, and we can also choose what index we want to start at if we want to change that. And we can also have a callback to the event instance in case we wanted to assign on event sequence finished. But another way to do it, perhaps an easier way, is I'm glad you think so, Outrack. This is essentially, I'll talk a little bit about why I made this system specifically when I get to the next feature, because I think that's important. But anyway, you can also just look up play linear event sequence, and then you get right here, essentially the same thing. You will still need to plug up the subsystem, but then you attach your event, and then you have it right here in Blueprints. It'll run through the event, and when it's done, it'll pop out right here. So yeah, that's essentially a way you can, actually, let's test it. Might as well. So when I hit 9, it'll run through this, and when we're done, let's just say finished. And we will make it black. Why not? So let's open up this, and I hit 9. Let's check for the top corner. Ta-da! Linear events. So that's the first element of the linear event system, but there's actually another element. Not just linear events that go out in a sequence, but also there's another feature called linear choices, which essentially is a way of you having a contained event where the player can make a choice of some kind. That works in a very similar way. So let's say my linear event. Now this might take more time to showcase all of it, so I'll probably just show you how it works rather than going through a full example. But essentially it works in a similar way. I said my linear event. No, my linear choice. Omega linear choices. Right there. This kind of works in a similar way where you have these custom options you can add. But again, instead of being a event that plays out in order, it's a choice that you have. So let's just do this. I'll remove that one. Say yes or no. And I'll talk about this condition thing in a second. Because again, you can create custom choices. And this system does need a little more work still as well. But so that's essentially how you'd set it up. You put your choices there. If you could create your own system for choices, like if you wanted to have specific, if you're creating a dialogue system and a choice might be a specific dialogue type, like it might be a question, or it might be a Mass Effect, a Paragon, or a Renegade option, and you want to specify that, you can do that because you can customize types of choices. The way you'd work that, similarly, you can go to the subsystem and fire off a choice. But for quickness sake, you also have an asynchronous action like with the events. So what you can do is look up linear choice, I think I called it. Play linear choice right there. Same way, get subsystem, plug up your choice, and then when the player selects a choice, you'd spit out right here on selected, you get a reference to the choice and its index. Now you also have one more thing, which is the choice instance class. Now, this is essentially an actor that will be spawned when the choice begins and destroyed when the choice ends, and it is where you would script specifically what happens during the choice and specifically how the player decides a choice. I don't know if I'll go over... Well, you know what? How am I doing on time? I'm only half an hour in. I think I can go over and show how this works. So let's make a new choice instance. Let's say... choice. I've had people compliment me on how fast I type, and I do type quickly. Does mean I make spelling errors a lot. So, my choice instance. So the way this would work, let's say on this choice instance, I want to make it pretty simple. It's just gonna, while the choice is available, we're gonna print out what the options are and until we've decided it. So let's say on event, while this choice instance is up, we'll say on event tick get choices. Let's do for each loop. Oops. Print string. Now, choices also make use of the general data, the data interface general, the general data interface, basically. If you're familiar with this, I admittedly haven't explained it very well in Omega, but it's something that a lot of assets use, and it's a way of very easily giving a name, description, and some icons to any object in the game. The way you would add it, data items use this, combatants use this, all sorts of things use this. You would just go to interfaces and look up data interface general, and there you would have access to that stuff right here. Point being, the choices by default have that interface implemented, which means you can essentially easily, rather than needing to cast to a specific choice, much easier, you can just get out the choice, get the text via the interface. So get general text, just through a message. That's the easiest way. Now, when you hover, it'll show up. At the top one's name, bottom one's description. I think it's name we need for choice. So yeah, so we'll say every second or every frame this is active, we're going to print out all our possible choices. And actually, let's append this so we print out the index as well. So let's first start with that and show you how that works. Just as an example of getting choices and printing them out. So let's select our instance, my choice instance. Same thing, when I hit 9, it'll print it out. When I hit play and I hit 9, there, it shows our options right there at the top. And now to select an option, you'll just, in the instance, go select choice right there, and you can select which index of the choice you want. Depending on how people feel, I may add more options to all this stuff, but for now, this is how it is. So let's just make it, each one corresponds to, hitting a button will activate the corresponding choice. So we'll say when I hit 0, it's choice 0, and when I hit 1, we go in choice index 1, and we will also need to make sure that the player automatically is able to possess and send inputs to this actor. So now, oh, and one more thing, we want to make sure that it actually worked. So let's pull out and say print string, and put our choice index here, and we'll make that black as well. So now, let's hit 9, and we'll say 1. Boom. There you go. That's how linear choices work. So it essentially lets you to, again, create a simple way of having a contained player choice system that you may have very many styles for. If you think of, like, I don't know, easy example, if any of you have played Dragon Age Inquisition, for example, that game has a dialogue wheel for choices, but it also has the wheel will change to a different style and a different format when you're making a really important choice. So that's where you might use an instance, something like that, where you're still making a choice, but you want the environment of the decision to change, if that makes sense. One more thing I'll go over in that area, it's not directly related to the linear choice system, but it kind of works in a similar way, is what I call just custom save conditions, which is, it's basically a way of creating a single struct that lets you check a bunch of, essentially just lets you check a bunch of conditions in your save game immediately to see if they're all true, to create branches in the story or in events. Let's just say custom condition. It works in more or less a very similar way. Custom, let's see, save, Omega save conditions. Essentially, you just fill out the conditions here, and again, they're fully instance and customizable. You can create new ones if you want. I have one by default for what data assets you've collected, for what save tags are in your game. Let's delete that one. And you can also change whether you want to check and see if all of them are true or if at least one of them is true. And once you've built up your condition, all you got to do is do omega save subsystem, say custom save conditions met, plug it in, and then it'll run through and make sure all of these are either true, either all of them are true, or if you've set this, at least one of them is true. And then it'll return true or false based on that. This will work along with the previous system, though it's not exactly the same. But anyway, so that's the first big feature, essentially a way of you creating events and kind of flowing sequences of any type. 1 minute. Thank goodness you can't get drunk on water. Yes, you're welcome, Canal. Again, kind of a lot of this is stuff I found I could really use. So I'll make it for myself, and if I can use it, other people probably can too. So it's no loss on me to just put it out, especially for free. And it helps other people. Everyone wins. Now, speaking of free stuff that helps everyone win, to follow up on this, one limitation of this system is while you can create branches and dialogue and events and stuff like that, it does become a bit tricky to start couching events within events within events to create branches and then reference back to them. Which is one thing I think Unreal kind of always could have used is a some sort of a customizable flow graph. Thanks, Outtrack. I'm very glad to hear that you're excited for this. I'm excited to get them out there and hopefully make tutorials for everything so people know how to use this stuff. Because I really want people to. I think they'd find it's very useful. But back to my topic anyway. There are some plugins in the marketplace that have solutions to some sort of customizable flow graph, but a lot of them are paid and a lot of them are kind of confusing. And some people have had alternatives like building flow graphs out in blueprints or using the AI system for it. And none of those have ever stuck right with me. Yes, quenching my thirst through the Estus flask. Ooh. Anyway, on to the topic of the graphs. Not too long ago, especially people who've been following the Circle of Orion devlogs will know this. I came across, I'd already kind of known of it, but I came across a plugin for Unreal Engine on GitHub by Moth Cocoon called the Flow Graph plugin. And it's essentially a way of creating, I believe the guy had worked on The Witcher 3, and I was inspired by that. It's a way of creating, it was like you would create what were effectively data assets, but data assets that had a flow graph with them. So you wouldn't script anything like blueprints where you would have a blueprint where you would script out stuff. It only contained data, but it allowed you to create a flow graph with branching events for things like quests, for things like dialogue, stuff like that. Now, very fortunately, he has licensed this under MIT, the MIT open source license, which Omega is also licensed under. So as a result, I went back and forth on this a while, and ultimately what I decided on is I've gone ahead and decided to implement a modified version of that flow graph directly into Omega Game Framework. And of course, being MIT, it'll be open source and available for everyone as well. Which means now you can create flow graphs in Unreal Engine using Omega that have branching events and stuff. And this, combined with a linear event system, is essentially my solution to creating things like quests or branching storylines or branching dialogue, any of that sort of stuff. And any of you who have used the flow graph plugin before, it works more or less the same way. There's a few differences though, but for the most part, it works the same way. So what you would do is, as I've done here, my flow asset, you just go to flow, which I may change to Omega Flow, we'll see. You can create flow assets. You can create custom nodes. But you'll just open it up right here. And here you have a flow graph, which looks similar to Blueprint. But again, you can only put in custom pre-made nodes. And you can't input like pins in between them, which may sound limiting. But the trade-off is it's incredibly fast. And it's a limitation that I think forces you to be creative in an efficient way. So the simplest way to use something like this is combining it with a linear event system to do something like create a dialogue. For example, let's say linear event. We'll have a flow graph called linear event. And I will just put out some events right here. Actually, let's delete, make it 2. Whenever I am testing out a dialogue system, I always have a little a conversation that I continue to reuse. Essentially, it goes like this. We'll start off with, hello, how are you today? So there's an example of a linear event, and in this case, actually, we will use our simple print just because I've already got it set up to show. So, hello, how are you today? So, since this is a linear event, when it finishes, it'll spit out here. Let's go to a choice. Linear choice. Ben, what's up? Hey, good to see you. I'm getting a bit to the latter part of the stream, kind of showing off all the new features. But again, it will be the VOD will be up. It'll be archived, so you can watch it after the fact. But I'm going over the implementation of the flow graph plugin, a modified version of Mothman's flow graph plugin, which will be implemented into Omega under the MIT license. So let's go to choices. Make sure we're using the choice instance we just created. And when he asks us how we're doing, let's say we can say we're either doing good or bad. And let's make sure to add the pins. The pins will, of course, correspond to the choice index. So that's 0, that's 1. So if we say we're doing good, let's have a new... Actually, we'll just copy and paste this one. It's faster. A new event where he'll say... Oops. Yeah, that's awesome. And if we say we're not doing good, we have... That's too bad. And when he's done, either way, he'll say, well, see ya. And it'll branch into that either way. And when he's done, we'll finish this. And you can create custom logic for what happens when a graph finishes or when it starts, all that sort of stuff. But essentially, this is how it would work. So let's go ahead and test this out. Once again, get rid of all that. We will say, oh no, wait, let's get flow subsystem. Let's say, I think it's play. Is it play or start root flow? This I might add an asynchronous event for. Instead, just for simplicity, right now this is how you'd use it. The owner will be the level. Why not? Let's select my flow asset. And so now let's test it out. When I hit 9, hello, how are you today? We have the options to say either good or bad. And again, of course, you can customize the specifics of how this appears in your game however you want. But I will say I am doing bad. Oops, sorry. Bad. Oh, that's too bad. Well, see ya. And there, it ends. So now, with that, we have linear events. We have linear choices, which I also could add into the flow graph. I'll show that in a second. Actually, I showed choices. And custom save checks, which I will show in a second. And a flow graph system, all of which together essentially create the last piece of Omega I think you need to actually create content for your game, especially for RPG style stuff. I did want to acknowledge what Canal said earlier about he says he's using Omega for a horror TPS True FP. It's like a first person horror game. It's been amazing and easy. I'm really glad to hear that. That's been the goal. This is all going to be in Omega version 1.2. Pretty much about everything I'm going to show here is going to be in 1.2. It will probably have some improvements afterward, but yes, which means 1.2 might be another month or so away. I'm not sure because I have to finish all this, make sure it all works, then get it approved on the marketplace, which is taking a while before. Which leads me to another thing I'll talk about in maybe just a second. Yes, I have one more thing to go over, then we'll talk about stuff regarding the Unreal Marketplace. Excuse me. I'm running out of water. All right. So that is that for that. Now, on to the next thing. It's not a new feature, but another thing I've been working on. I posted a bit about this on Twitter as well, and I think I posted in the Discord. But one thing in addition to all this I've been creating is essentially creating demo examples for a lot of the different features in the game. So a lot of demo abilities, linear events like I've been showing, linear choices, game systems, a lot of the different features that I've added. I've been creating demo examples of it that you can, or more accurate to say templates, to essentially get you start, rather than you necessarily needing to create something from scratch. It'll provide you a base which you can then build off of. Kind of to talk more, to give more specific examples, I've been creating, among these, I've been creating a refill at the next bonfire. Yeah, well, my bonfire in that case is on the other side of the building. So it'll be a hot minute. But forgot what I was talking about. Demos and templates. The idea essentially being I'm creating a bunch of abilities or systems or linear events that will fulfill a lot of common functions. And this is probably most interesting in the case of abilities because I'm essentially creating, it's letting me create a lot of common use abilities that you might want in your game. For instance, if I open up Omega and look up abilities, some of the ones I have in right now are ones I'm working on are ones for an auto attack, a dodge, a jump, just playing a montage, a sprint, or targeting a combatant. In fact, I think I have an example of the targeting one I can show off in a minute. But essentially, these are all built in C++, and the idea is you would just add in a few variables of your own, and they would be essentially entirely functional already with some customization available to them. So for example, ability montage, let's say my montage ability. This one, and I need to add proper descriptions to all these, but this one would be common use in a lot of games. It essentially would just play a montage of your choosing, and when it's completed, when the montage is completed, it completes the ability. So stuff like that would be pretty common use. So if you look in here, there's obviously the normal actor functions, ability functions, but then a few specific to this one, such as get montage, which determines what montage you can play. You might access the you might put in one directly, or it might be different depending on the character mesh, whatever. There's I'll go over that and a few more things for the ability. There have been a few more improvements to abilities in general that I'll go over in a second. I forgot to add that in the notes, but I think you'll like some of those. Then there's stuff for montage notify on begin and on end, stuff like that. Actually, I think I can show you the targeting ability because that should be already done. If I go to here, and sorry, it's a bit scatterbrained. What happens if I open up this? Not what's supposed to happen. There. This is a bit of a testing I was doing, and I don't think. All right. The targeting ability is still needing some work, but essentially the way it would work is once you register someone as a possible target, it will work like targeting does. That specific one would work like, say, how targeting would in something like Dark Souls, on the topic of this. So quickly Canal brings up he tried to play an ability, replicated, but no success. So this is another thing I need to specify. Right now, everything in Omega is being designed first with single player in mind. I am doing my best to design it in ways where adding multiplayer in the future can be done. However, there is no testing for things like replication or any of that for pretty much anything in Omega right now. That is something that's just is going to have to wait because there's a whole another bag of issues that come with multiplayer and replication and all that stuff. And since this was always kind of designed first for single player stuff, that is the focus, unfortunately. Now, in the cases of some of this stuff, since they are actors and whatnot, there should still be a level of replication that is still possible. But I have not tested or looked into any of that myself. So that is something that a restriction of Omega to be aware of now. Generally, it's intended for single player stuff at the moment. Anyway, so let's see. Let me see if we can pull up the targeting ability. I think the targeting ability actually needs some more work done. I don't know if it's a great example, and I can't show it off from here. See, battle action, test ability, targeting. This might have a little too much blueprint code. Yeah, so even that's actually a little more blueprint code than I would like. But essentially, a lot of the core stuff is already there, so I could. Well, at this point, you're. Oh, sorry, Canal again. I was talking about the macros are very useful as well. Thank you. That's another thing I actually haven't talked about a ton with Omega, but Omega has come with a lot of useful macros that I have added myself to make doing a lot of stuff easier. Like a few of them are do once delay, which runs through something once and then blocks it from running through again until a delay is completed. There's do once switch, which allows you to essentially only ever go to true or false once until the condition changes. And those are both useful for something like event tick. Then there's one of my favorite, which is for each loop wait, which I use for things like dialogue and whatnot a lot. It essentially it works like a normal for loop, with the exception of once it goes through the loop body, it will not go into the next element or index until you manually tell it to. So that's really good for making sure you have specific control over when stuff in a for loop happens. And one more one that's pretty useful is there's a lot more you can look up, but not do once delay. Do once per object. This one is very useful for things like dealing damage. For example, I use this a lot where when I start the damage, I'll get anything in the circle or in the radius of, say, a sphere or a box. I'll apply damage to it, but I don't want to hurt it more than once until I have reset this. So it essentially lets you to run a function on a list of objects on an object only one time until you have manually told it to reset. So that's what that is. There's a bunch more. You can look at them. I believe there's documentation for them. If not, they should be under the Omega score. You can just check them out, look them up. A lot of good ones. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of the test abilities and stuff are still work in progress. Hard to show them off, but there you have it. As for abilities themselves, probably the last thing I'll go over for Omega specifically. There have been there's actually been a lot of improvements to a lot of systems, but it's a ton of stuff that I don't have time to go over because I'd have to kind of parse through a lot of it and make a note of everything I've gone over and take a while. But hey, sup, Swirl Beast. Sorry to say we are starting to come to the end of the stream, but I'm glad you could catch it. I really appreciate it. You being here. Anyway, what was I talking about? Abilities. New improvements to abilities. And I'll actually pull up a raw ability just to make this clear. My ability. Chief among them being cooldowns, HUDs, and timelines. A big part of the reason why I decided to make abilities in Omega to be actors and not just a custom object like they are in Omega's default ability system, and the same with why I made game systems actors, is so that I would have access to components, and primarily the timeline component. An incredibly useful one to use especially for abilities and planning out specific events at specific times. As using abilities in here, you can add timelines for events. Now, in the new version of Omega, in 1.2, one second. Thank goodness I don't have to talk to anyone after this today. I'm not going to have a threat when I'm done. Anyway, in Omega 1.2 and onwards, you can actually set up a timeline, let's create the timeline here. Timeline. That will automatically play and play forward and reverse when your ability activates. So, for example, maybe you have an aim ability that when you hold down the mouse, your character will aim at a specific direction, and when you release the mouse, they'll stop. So the idea is when you activate the ability, the aim would begin. When you release it, the aim would end. Well, you're going to have a blending time between the aiming mode and the not aiming mode. So say you could get the camera here and you could change its the FOV on it over a certain amount of time using the timeline, or change its position or whatever. Well, all you would then need to do is take the reference to that timeline, plug it here into get ability activation timeline, and when you start that ability, it'll play the timeline. When you finish it, it'll reverse it out to where it began. And because it uses play and reverse and not play from start and reverse from end, it'll always be seamless. So there's that. Let's see, another one. An improvement, small improvement to can activate, where you can now access the context to decide whether it should be something in there that can determine whether you can activate that ability. You can now add name tags to actors. This is a feature that I don't know how many people use. I use a lot. Actors and components, I mean, a lot of you are probably familiar with the gameplay tag system, but actors and components actually have soft name tags like this that you can use, that I find really, really useful in their own right. And essentially, abilities can now add and remove those tags on activation or on granting to the actor. And where is cooldown? We'll talk about cooldown. This is pretty simple. It allows you to set up a scenario where once an ability is finished, either through completion or canceling, it'll go into a cooldown where it can't be activated for a certain amount of time. Now, typically, a lot of common cases are skills in an RPG would go on a cooldown, but sometimes just for safety, you don't want someone spamming an ability and breaking the code. So you might add half a second or a tenth of a second of a cooldown to prevent something like that happening. So you can customize the amount here, and you can also tell it to beginning cooldown if you want it to start with that. And then lastly is the HUD class. Now this one I still need to test to see if this works perfectly, but essentially the way this works is it allows you to choose a HUD that will automatically be added to the player's screen when the player is given this ability. So that way, essentially it essentially helps with putting everything relevant to a system or a mechanic in one place. So you could reference, let me see, think of an example. Say you had an ability for executing skills, just in Ys or in Xenoblade, something like that, where you have a skill palette, or in a lot of RPGs, you have a skill palette and you have an ability that executes that skills. Well, rather than add that skill, the HUD element for that skill onto your main HUD and have to keep referencing back and forth, instead, you can add it through here. And then as soon as you're granted this ability, that HUD will be added onto your screen. When you ungrant the ability, it'll be gone. So again, keep things modular, keep them kind of contained together, and in a way that they're easy to remove and add and remove without breaking other things in the game. Canal asks, or says, this cooldown thing would be useful for fire rates, or wouldn't be good would be useful for fire rates, so wouldn't be good to have. Or is he asking, would it be useful to have for fire rates, or wouldn't be good because spawning too many actors? Yeah, that's essentially, I mean, you could use it for stuff like that. Again, a lot of this is not stuff you need to use, and perhaps you'd want to create a more sophisticated cooldown system. Say maybe you wanted to create more specific cooldown conditions as to when you use an ability, and then just add them to whether you can activate it or not. You could do that too. This is just meant to be a quick common use people might have, where I just want a simple way of saying when the ability is done, wait, don't let it activate right away, give it a bit of a cooldown. For example, I typically use an ability for the pause menu in games I create, where the player, hits a button, it opens the pause menu. For safety, I'll typically give that like a 0.2 second cooldown, so if you try spamming the menu, it won't break something in the code because it's going too fast. It'll always wait 0.2 seconds before allowing you to reopen the menu. So that's one example of that. Anyway, one more. See if I can make it. The throat's starting to go. Anyway, I got a bit of warm G Fuel. If I need to, we'll go with that. So that is basically about everything regarding Omega that I wanted to talk about in terms of improvements. There are a few other things to go over. Probably the most important thing is regarding updates to Omega in the future. This will probably be the last one, barring any changes that I'll make known to you. This will probably be the last version of Omega that is updated for for Unreal Engine 4. From here on out, after this will be released for Unreal Engine 4 and 5. After 1.2, from 1.3 on, probably unless something else happens, probably all versions of Omega Game Framework will only be Unreal Engine 5 and onwards. Simply because Unreal Engine 5 has access to a lot of features that I want to make use of that are not available on Unreal 4. And so that makes managing become more difficult. But on top of that, a lot of the base code not a lot, but a decent amount of the code between Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine 4 and how certain things are handled are different enough to where even if the code for Omega in both versions is identical, I need to make a lot of changes between the two of them just to get them working, and it greatly increases the amount of time having to manage both of them. And so I initially planned on waiting for Unreal time to get a new PC. I will say, I think depending on how you set up Unreal 5, you can get it to work on slightly not low end PCs, but if you don't use Lumen or Nanite much, or a lot of the other stuff, go crazy with the lighting. It's still a bit heavy, admittedly, but it should be fairly manageable. But that is another element. I know that is unfortunately not everyone's PC can run Unreal 5, but for the sake of making Omega the best it can be, it's kind of what I've ultimately decided to do from 1.3 onwards. 1.2 will still, I think everything in it will still be available for Unreal 4. So don't worry about that for now. But in the future, this will probably be the last one for Unreal 4. However, on a lighter note, I think it's time to talk about a bit of a secret-ish project I've been working on for a while. Now, part of the difficulty in developing Omega Game Framework is, and I've realized this in developing some of my other games with it, is it's often hard to tell what specific features I need until I am actually making a game with it. And then I realize, oh, actually, I need this, I need that, I need this. It can be hard to wing it when you're just guessing on what you need. So what I found is, what I ultimately decided on is probably the best way to develop Omega from here on out, was going to be to do it within the context of a game, specifically the type of game that I generally would plan on making this for. And it is from there, let's see if I should have pulled some of the stuff up earlier. I got exposed a little bit there, oh no. It is from there that I decided to start yet another game, but this one it is a bit different than the other ones. So it's not taken, well, I'll show you in a second. Sorry, I meant to have this pulled up earlier, but it didn't quite work out. So it is, come on, where is all this stuff for this? I need that. Here we go. So it is from this idea of building... Oh, well, I've given it away now. It's from this idea of building Omega Game Framework within the context of making an actual game itself that I started creating a new game called Jade March. Jade March is going to be, and by going to be I mean is an open source RPG that I'm making primarily as a platform to build and test Omega Game, any future features and systems for Omega Game Framework on. The idea is, because I'm building them within the context of an actual game, I'm building more stuff than I'll need. If any of you follow Epic Games and their inside, have followed their kind of what they've done and their inside Unreal throughout the years, you'll notice a lot of the features they made for Unreal Engine actually started in some of the games they made, in things like Paragon or in Fortnite or games like that, where they made stuff specifically for that game, realized how useful it was, then brought it over into Unreal Engine proper. This is kind of a similar idea of what I'm doing, is behind making Jade March. Now, to be clear, this is not me attempting to make a full-on AAA game or anything like that, and it's not even going to be taking time away from any of the stuff I'm working on, because the idea is I'm essentially just making this the framework, the environment in which I'm going to be making improvements to Omega. As for why this is relevant to you guys, well, like I said, it is going to be open source. And by going to be, I mean it is open source. Right now, if any of you have access, the links to my GitHub, where Omega is at, you can also go and find the GitHub for Jade March and download it and get a look at it and dive into it right now. Now, admittedly, there's not a lot to see in the project at the moment. It's mostly just a map, a couple things I've started prototyping, but it does contain all the changes to Omega Game Framework that'll be coming in 1.2 and beyond. So from now on, this will essentially be where I will be developing any new changes to Omega and where I will be testing them. So we'll be first testing them. So the Ben thinks it's definitely neat. Thank you. So I'll probably put the description or the link to this in the description after this video after the stream is over. But if any of you want to, work on, add to Omega or add to Jade March or get involved or just want to follow what's going on, the project is going to be totally open source, like Omega itself under MIT, and you are free to. It should be. I'll even double check right now to see if it is publicly accessible. But essentially, if you're familiar with how GitHub works, you can just either download GitHub Desktop and clone the repository, or just download it that way. But yeah, it's totally public, available for you to go and take a look at. And like Omega and get anything on GitHub, if you want to try and contribute to it, feel free. Obviously, can't guarantee anything is going to be put into the game or into Omega, but there you go. So that's the plan for that. And that's essentially what's happening for Omega in the future. So, I am, okay, I'm not going to promise anything regarding Jade March in terms of streaming. I was about to say it's an idea I'd like to maybe stream me working on that, but I'm not going to promise anything. But yeah, if you want to keep an eye on that, that'll probably be updated pretty regularly. And again, publicly available. So there you go. All the updates coming for Omega 1.2 and beyond. Jade March itself, that should be more information on that on the Studio SyndiCast website pretty soon after the stream ends. Again, that's kind of the main place you want to go and check out anything. It's on the Studio SyndiCast website. So thank you all for joining. I'll be working more updates for Omega coming, obviously. There almost certainly will be a devlog for Circle of Orion at the end of this month. I didn't know I missed last month, and the one was kind of late this month, but I am still planning on getting one out this month. It'll probably be in a similar style to the last one, where it's just me kind of filming it and winging it, but I'm still planning on putting that out because that game is still a work in progress. And I do have more updates in regards to what I'm working on coming in the near future. Specifically, if any of you are familiar with Mariposa and the Galaxy Man and my work with Ink Rose, there is some stuff related to not as much that game, but my work with her. That'll be announced more in the future. You can actually, if you follow her on Twitter, or on YouTube, there's some stuff related to what we're working on there as well. But that project we're working on there also makes use of Omega Game Framework. So yeah, check out all that stuff. Thank you all. Again, if any of you like what I do and have the means and interest, I would appreciate it if you would consider donating to either my Ko-fi or Subscribestar. But if you don't, it's totally fine. Omega's still free for good. So thank you all, everyone, for watching. Yeah, it's been a good time. I'm going to go rest my voice now. I lost my loading screen. I will see you guys later. See ya.